Welcome, everyone, to another installment of the Isolationist Guide to whatever we're doing today, which happens to be the Isolationist Guide to Playing Backup. And I'm, as always, super appreciative of people joining on this journey of exploring the mandolin and all these different facets of it. And uh, yeah, I'm I'm looking forward to being able to rename this the post isolationist guide rather than just the isolationist guide. But we're not fully out of lockdown here in Toronto, and I'm uh, just holding out. I don't want to jinx things. So anyhow, I hope everyone's having a great summer and starting to get out there playing music with other people again. Um, and yeah, today we're going to talk about actually what I think is the most important aspect of playing music with other people. Um, all of us, myself included, spend so much time focused on learning our technique and developing um, skills. Oh, original sound turned itself. There we go. Um, Working on our improvisation and our lead playing and stuff, but really when we're playing with other people, what they care about more than anything is how good a time they're having. And really, how good a time they're having often is directly correlated with how well they're playing, like how good they feel about their playing. And often what is, or not often, but really always, what is the most, sorry, I'm just as people are signing in, I'm getting a few messages here and there. What will allow people to play their best is actually how well supported they are. I'm sure we've all been in jams where, for whatever reason, I mean, sometimes we're having a bad day and we can't find our footing and what have you, but we've all been in jams where, for whatever reason, we just can't get settled. We keep hitting speed bumps that throw us off. And sometimes we may not even be conscious of it, but it can be caused by the people we're playing with aren't laying down solid rhythm, or they're not matching your feel, or all these other elements that are super important to playing music with other people. It's one thing to sit in a room by yourself or with a metronome and be able to play well, but what's happening in real life when you're actually in a jam is things are very dynamic and time is more elastic, and everyone has a slightly different sense of what should be happening. So trying to be as supportive as possible is really what's going to make the experience great for other people. And when you're supported really well and someone's really listening closely to you, and if you happen to speed up a tiny bit and they go with you, or you might not even notice that's happening, but you'll notice that you're playing well and more freely. And if you've ever played with someone who's really good at laying down rhythm, you'll find yourself playing better. So we're going to talk about all different aspects of playing backup, and this is going to be a slightly different workshop than some of the previous ones. I do have some handouts and we've got some exercises to look at, but I'm also going to be playing you some musical examples of recordings that I've done, or recordings that have influenced me, that can look at different approaches to backup, because there's such a wide range, and the difference between different styles of music, or whether you're backing someone up in a song or an instrumental tune, they're all have different considerations. So let's just start diving in. And for those of you that took my isolationist guide to playing rhythm, I'm going to do a little bit of a review of some of the rhythmic approaches, because to me, and to most of us that come from a bluegrass sensibility, everyone wants to learn how to chop on the mandolin. And it's a really effective technique that I think is super valuable, and it's what makes the mandolin such a strong percussive instrument. And it really fits in all styles of music, any even styles of music where there are drums. The mandolin can kind of play that role in an acoustic string situation. So we're going to look at just building on the chop and different ways that we can express rhythm and feels with just the basic chop. So there's a handout here. You don't really need to look at the handout, but you'll have it for reference. I've got different chop chords. For those of you that don't know what a chop chord is, I'm sure there are a few that come from like Celtic or old time that may not have even been familiar with the term chop chords. Chopping is the mandolin's main rhythmic role in a bluegrass context. And the chord that we use, like for a G chord, if you're playing an open G chord, the first chord many people learn is this open G chord where you've got the bottom two strings. And whenever I'm talking top or bottom, I'm always referring to it in relationship to pitch. So when I say my bottom string, I mean the lowest pitch string, and that's my G string. Even though it's physically the furthest one from the ground and the top one, I'm always talking pitch. So up the neck means going this way, down the neck means going this way, bottom string is my lowest pitch string, my top string, and so on. Just so you've got the language. I think it's always better to be thinking of these things in relationship to what you're expressing musically. So for that reason, I always do that. So the chop chord is this specific voicing that I don't know if Bill Monroe invented it, but he's the one that everyone sort of accredits with the beginning of the chop chord, and it's a particular voicing where like the open G chord where you've got the G and D string, your bottom strings are open, and then you got your index finger on the second fret of the A string, which is a B note, and then your middle finger on the third fret of the E string, that'll be a G note. So that's your open G chord. And the chop chord, you keep your index and middle finger down, and then your ring finger goes down on the 5th fret of the D string, and your pinky goes on the 7th fret of the G string, which for many of you who are new to this will feel like a stretch. Trust me, your hands will change if you practice this. If you're having difficulty with it at first, and just real quickly, I want to give you some ideas on how to practice playing new chords. It may seem simple to just put all your fingers down at the same time, but it's almost like you're patting your head and rubbing your stomach, because each finger has to go to a different spot. And even though they're all going down, you have to be conscious of each finger. So that can be difficult at first. So for those of you that are new to playing chords, or new to the chop chord, or are learning some new chord voicings, maybe some jazzier voicings, or just other voicings that are new to your hands, the way I recommend people practice it. Now, if playing a G chord to begin with is a little bit of a stretch, the higher up the mandolin neck you go, the closer the frets are. So you can stretch a little bit less. And if you notice that I mentioned my middle finger on the top string is playing the G note of the G chord, then we can have a reference for where all of our chords will be. So, G, I actually didn't put it in the handouts, but I will actually put this in the handouts for those that I've given this out in previous workshops. So if you've taken my workshops already, then you probably have this handout already, which is just a schematic of the mandolin fingerboard if you don't know where the notes are. But G would be here, up 2 frets would be A, up a fret would be B flat, up another fret would be B, and up another fret would be C. So it's all the same grip, and I'm just using my middle finger for the chop chord as my reference for what chord it is. So I've got my G chord here. Similarly, my C chord, C is, if my middle finger is on the G note on that E string, just down a string at the same fret is my C note. So I would take this 4-note voicing, all my fingers are on a string, and move everything down a string. So I've got nothing on the high E string, and I'm actually just letting my fingers mute that string. And then I've got my C chord, which is a 3-note voicing now for that particular chop chord. And similarly, it follows the same pattern. My middle finger is on the 3rd fret of the A string, which is a C note. And then as I go up 2 frets to D, 2 frets up to E, 1 fret up to F, and so on. And we're going to look at some ways to learn how to orient ourselves on the fingerboard a little bit later. We're not going to spend too much time on this, but I just wanted to establish that. So if you're learning a new chord and you have difficulty getting your fingers down, first thing you want to practice is just being able to play that chord. So being able to put your fingers down and make sure every one of those notes is audible. So you don't have anything like, you hear how those notes are muted. So we need to get our hand able to first be able to just play all those notes. And when we're doing that, playing it over and over again once we have our hand down is not really practicing that. The way to practice that, in my opinion, is you take your hand away from the mandolin neck, and you can even shake it out and reset it so it's like you're coming fresh at the mandolin fingerboard every time, and then put all your fingers down and try and make all the notes. Now, if you've got some notes that aren't ringing out, the idea is that you might even need to use your right hand to actually stretch your fingers into the position they need to be in to make all those notes ring. Then once you get them all ring, then what do? You take your hand away, shake it out again, and do it again. And it's only once you can continually put all your fingers down in one motion and get all those notes ringing that you're ready to actually use that chord in real time. Otherwise, if you're playing a song and you can't get all your fingers down, then there's no way you're going to be able to do that in real time and be able to keep good rhythm. So again, the first thing is just practicing getting your fingers down in place in one motion. Then once you can do that repeatedly, then you're ready to practice playing the rest of the chords in that song. And in a bluegrass and like most folk music, often we only have 3 chords to worry about. That's often, not always the case, our 1 chord, our 4 chord, and our 5 chord. And there is a handout here that has all the keys, and even here I've got a 1, 4, 5 handout that you can look at that just starts off with just the key of G, the key of C, and the key of D. And if you look at that first line, I've written a 2-octave scale, so 2 octaves being my whole G major scale twice. So G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. So that's 2 octaves. So again, I'm just going to be reviewing real quickly a little bit. So our 1 chord, if we look at this G major scale, this tune, presumably, that we're talking about, this hypothetical tune, is in the key of G. So our 1 chord is the key that we're in, so the key of G. And we can just count by virtue of what a G major scale is, and there's a handout there that has all the scales with the key signatures and everything, so you don't have to worry about it per se. But our G major scale, if we count our G as 1, so we're not starting at 0 and then our second note is 1, we're starting with G as 1. If we count up 1, 2, 3, 4, we see that our 4th degree is C, which is also our 4 chord, which is how it's arrived at, and our 5 chord is D. So that's what that is there for. So the first thing we want to be able to do is be able to play, and if we're talking about a tune that is a 1-4-5 tune, which is mostly what we're going to look at today, we've got our G chord, our C chord, and our D chord. Now there is, on that rhythm and chord section, there is another D chord that I recommend you being able to use. So I just showed you the 4-note version of the G, the 3-note version of the C, and then moved it up a full tone to my D chord, and full tone being 2 frets, a semitone would be 1 fret. So from C up to D is a full tone, 2 frets up. But there's another 4-note voicing for that D chord that we use often when we're coming from our G chord, which is if we were to go back to this D chord, the 3-note version, and actually just played all these 3 notes, but shifted what fingers we were using for that down 1 each. So my middle finger would be on the 4th fret of the D string, my ring finger would be on the 5th fret of the A string, and my pinky would be on the 7th fret of the G string. Then it would free up my index finger to play the 2nd fret of the E string. So once you can play all of these chords on their own, you want to be able to shift from G to C, or G to D, or D to C, all from any of those 3 chords to any of the other 3 chords in one motion. So if you can't do that yet, then you need to actually go back and practice. I've got my G chord. Are all the notes ringing? Yes. I go to my D chord. Are all my notes ringing? If not, again, you just need to practice being able to go back and forth from that. It's the practice of moving your fingers to it, not the practice of actually, once you've got it, playing it, that you want to be doing. You want to be practicing the muscle memory that's required to get your fingers to go to the right spot. I'm just making sure that I can see the chat. I always welcome people to ask questions if I'm in the middle of an idea and you've written it down in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I'm finished the idea. And I really like questions. When people have questions, it usually answers questions that other people did not know about. Okay, so we're going to move on with these chords. So again, this is review for some people, but I think anyhow. So the chop chord. What is cool about these specific chords are that we're not using any open strings. So we can do this effect that is a big part of chopping, where we are going to play the chord and mute the strings by taking the pressure off with our left hand. I'm not taking my fingers off the mandolin neck or off the strings. I'm just releasing the pressure so that I can mute it, which gives the chord a slightly more percussive, pointed time thing. So in bluegrass, and like I said, a lot of folk and Americana and old-time music, the mandolin the chop is a particular role, where if we're talking about tunes that are in 4/4 time, so they have 4 beats to a bar, the bass would be playing on beats 1 and 3, and the mandolin would be doing like a response on beats 2 and 4. So you get this drum kit-esque boom chick relationship. So what I want to be able to do, and very useful to when you're practicing this, to learn how to tap your foot on beats 1 and 3 where the bass would be, or when you're practicing with a metronome, where I would put the metronome, I'd put it so that it's not clicking 4 beats to a bar, but clicking on every other beat, so beats 1 and 3, and the mandolin would be the response to that on beats 2 and 4. So first thing I want to be able to do is just be able to do this on a G chord. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the way I should be counting it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can hear me tapping my foot on beats 1 and 3. And if you're playing with a more experienced bass player in this kind of music, what you're going to discover is that they're listening to you, the mandolin player, pretty closely for their timing. And an experienced bass player in this kind of music is actually going to mute their note where the mandolin chop should be as well. So when you're playing with the bass player, if you listen, a less experienced bass player may just let the note ring, boom, 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 until from beat 1 all the way until beat 3. But a more experienced bass player is going to often mute their notes to give you a target of where the mandolin should be. So boom, 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 so that it feels like the mandolin is actually ending that note, and it makes it a more unified sound, and which is a great first target. You know, if there's a guitar player in there, they're going to try and make their bass notes line up with the bass, but their offbeat, their strum, to line up with the mandolin chop as well. And that's how we get nice and tight. Now, many of you may be asking, what is the right duration to let the chop ring out before you mute it? And the answer to that question is simply yes. What do I mean by that? Well, you can have different effects and different influences on the music by how long you let the chop ring out. So if when I play, if I want to make the music feel a little bit more laid back, I might let the mandolin chop ring out a little bit longer. So it'd be like boom, 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 boom. But if I want to give it a sense of urgency, even at the same tempo, I might mute it more quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Or if I want to have a more modern aesthetic, more modern feel, I might favor the bottom strings a little bit more and not have the high strings as much, and mute it, again, more quickly. Which will all have different influences on how the music sounds. If I'm playing behind a guitar player and I'm trying to get out of their way because the guitar has difficulty cutting through a full bluegrass band, I might actually go to a fully muted chop, right? So these are ways that I can influence the time feel just by how long I let the chord ring before muting it. So when you're practicing this, you can start off by first letting it ring out. And if I want to sound like old-timey, like early Monroe type stuff, I really let the pick get through all the strings and let the high strings really be a part of it, versus being a low woofy sound, which could be more modern sounding.